Hi, I'm Alan Walker, and this is my first Booktube video. I'm excited, also a little nervous. When I was doing some research trying to see what kind of videos a Booktube newbie should do, a lot of people recommended doing TBR, which is to be read videos to start out with. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of break it down. First I'm going to talk about the books that I'm currently reading, and then I'll talk about my to be read fiction books. And then I'll do a different video, just to keep it short, of my to-be-read nonfiction, because I don't want to make my first video really long. I don't want anybody to have to sit through 30 minutes of my very first video, so I'll just separate my fiction and nonfiction into two different videos. I like to be reading a nonfiction and fiction book kind of at the same time, so if one gets slow, I can kind of just go back and forth, or if one's really interesting, I can just put one on the back burner. And I've always got something interesting to read. So, without further ado, here's what I am currently reading. For fiction, Return of the Crimson Guard by Ian Esselmont. Now, this is a side story of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is a really long, expansive, massive series by Stephen Erickson. And you don't have to read these while you're reading the story proper. In fact, many people have suggested just reading all the Erickson books, 1 through 10, and then coming back to the Esselmont books. But this particular book, Return of the Crimson Guard, happens to take place at the same time as Book 7 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is Reaper's Gale, the book I actually just finished. And apparently, if I read the 8th book, Toll the Hounds, it spoils something in Return of the Crimson Guard, and I don't like spoilers. So I'm reading this one maybe for the rest of my life. I have been reading this book for a very long time, and it is a slog. It is just a beast to work through. And I'll talk more about why that is when I do my review of Return of the Crimson Guard, but just as an example, Reaper's Gale, the last book of the Malazan series that I read, 1,250 pages, took me about a month to get through all of that. This book, only 850, but after 7 weeks, I am on page 454. So it's just a challenge to get through this book. Next on the currently reading is Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. This book is about when to say yes and how to say no, and how to draw boundaries with work, with relationships, with friends. If you're like me and you're a people pleaser, sometimes it is hard to say no to things because you want to help people or you like doing things for people, and sometimes that can create a lot of internal stress. So this is a really good book, recommended by a bunch of people to me. So first on my fiction TBR, we have boom, Toll the Hounds, boom, Dust of Dreams, books 8 and 9 of Malazan Book of the Fallen. Not pictured here is book 10, The Crippled God, which I do not own because I will not need to read it for a while. I will read it, I just don't own it quite yet. So these are huge, guys. Look at this. This is like 1,250 pages, and this is like 1,250 pages. They're all this long. I started the Malazan Book of the Fallen series like 15 years ago. And the first time I attempted, I made it to book 3. And then the second time I tried it, I made it to book 5. The third time I attempted, I made it all the way to book 8, which is where I am now, Toll the Hounds, and I stopped reading them. And so now, 5 years later, I began at the beginning with Gardens of the Moon, and I've made it all the way to book 8 again. And this time, I'm going to finish Malazan Book of the Fallen, because I am not reading all of those books again. So long. They prevent me from reading a lot of other things because they're so long. But I am excited to see where this series goes. Really, really epic series. Next, The Black Company by Glenn Cook. And the Black Company series is one of my favorite series and was for a really long time. I'm rereading these for the purpose of reviewing them. Glenn Cook is really kind of the father of the grimdark fantasy novel, where everything's really gritty and characters actually die, and there's not a ton of good cheer and happiness going around. But the Black Company series is about a mercenary group that is hired and protects villages or protects people, and they get wrapped up in this clash of really titanic, godlike figures called the 10 Who Were Taken, and then it just kind of spirals from there. But what I really like about the Black Company series is that they're all told from the analyst of the company, and an analyst is the guy who keeps the annals. He's the guy who keeps the journal of the company. And so it's mostly one guy named Croker for most of the series, but there are a couple other analysts who take over. And so that's really fun to read. Each one of them has a different writing style, which I really like. So, Black Company, excited to start this. This I can finish super fast. So next, this is a placeholder. This is Terry Pratchett's Men-at-Arms. This is book 2 of the Guard series. Terry Pratchett books, the Discworld novels, specifically, are broken up into storylines. There's the Guard storylines, the Death storylines, the Wizards, and the Witches for the most part. There are a couple standalone novels, and there are some children's books about the wee free men. Those aren't my favorite, but my favorite of the Pratchett books are the Guard series, starring Commander Vimes and the City Watch. I don't own Guards anymore because, like some of you I'm sure have experienced, a while ago let someone borrow it to read it, and it was never returned to me. And I'm having difficulty finding a copy on Amazon that isn't super expensive. So I'll be ordering another copy of Guards. Again, a reread for review purposes, because Pratchett, I used to read Pratchett, and more Pratchett all the time. I really like wordplay, and I really like clever puns, not all puns, clever puns. And Pratchett is really the king of wordsmithing, while being hilarious. So I'm excited to restart the Pratchett books. Next, a book I have never read, Into the Fire by Taylor Anderson. Hang on.
It says Into the Storm, not the Fire.
Thank you. Next up, Into the Storm by Taylor Anderson of the Destroyer Men series. I originally said Into the Fire, and my wife flagged me down and told me that was incorrect. So thank you, Christina, for correcting me. I would hate to upset the author by quoting their title wrong. So this is the first of a series. I really like historical fiction, and I really like military fantasy as well. So this kind of mixes the two. It takes place during World War II on a destroyer ship, and it goes through like a dimensional portal, and they end up in a place where there are dinosaurs and lizard people, and they kind of have to ally with the alien races on this new land that is both their world but not their world. It looked like an easy read, and my wife and I are doing a book challenge, and on one of them is a book that looked easy to read, and this is it, so hopefully I am correct in that. Also, not 1,250 pages. Next we have The Iron Ship by K.M. McKinley, and I'm not gonna lie, part of the reason this book is on my list is because of the title and the cover. This is a really pretty cover. And I love steampunk fantasy. I love it when fantasy and magic is mixed with technology and machines, and not quite into cyberpunk, but I really like dirigibles and clocks and clockwork things. And I think that's what actually turned me on to this book. I think the third one or something is called The Clockwork God or something similar. And I saw that, and I wasn't going to read the third book first, because who does that? And so I looked back and saw that this was the first book. Now, this book didn't get really great reviews. It's about a family, and one of the kids is a soldier and one is a wizard, and they build a massive iron kind of steampunk ship to sail across to lands unknown. And that excites me. So I'm excited to read this one and see if it is as not great as people are saying it is. Who knows? I often like books people don't like, and don't like books that people do like. So we'll see. Next on my fiction list is The Warded Man by Peter V. Brett. This is the first one, again, of a new series. I read the same series over and over again for a long time, so a lot of my TBRs are really starting brand new series. The books I've read historically have been historical fiction, military fantasy, ancient history books, things like that. So I'm excited to start this series, which from the back it looks like there are demons that attack these cities that have like warded bubbles around them, and these three youths go outside of the wards or the bubbles or whatever and deal with the demons, which I think are called Corlings. They are called Corlings. I was correct. So I'm excited to read this one as well. It got good reviews, so I'm hoping it's decent. Next we have City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. This book just looked cool when I was browsing around trying to find books to add to my list. I know the author has a more recent book, the first one of a trilogy, called Foundryside, and that got really excellent reviews, and some of the booktubers I follow have already reviewed it and say it's really good. I'm excited to read that. But first I wanted to read the Divine Cities trilogy here. Apparently the world used to be, or the city, I guess, used to be controlled by these really hostile ancient elder gods, and now it's more modern day, kind of analogous to modern day Russia, and the gods are kind of buried, but the city is still filled with these staircases that go everywhere and nowhere all at once. So that seems awesome. But I do want to comment about books this size. I don't like books that are this size. Like, look at this difference in size between these two. Why aren't all books like this, mass market paperback size? This doesn't fit on my shelf as well. I don't like how heavy it is in my hands sometimes, saying that while also holding the 1,250 page book of a Malazan series. But still, I don't know why books have to be this big, but I'll read it. Looks cool. Next we have the Curse of Chalion, or the Curse of Chalion. I don't know how it's pronounced, but it's by Lois McMaster Bujold, or Bujold. This book looked really cool despite having a bunch of French-sounding names. It is about a military veteran, a knight that kind of comes home and becomes a tutor for a princess, but it looks like it's dealing with his internal trauma, a very character-driven novel, but also filled with political intrigue. I love books that have a lot of political intrigue. This was my book that won an award for my reading challenge list. The second one, Paladin of Souls, I think is the sequel to this. It won a Hugo Award, so that's why I put this one on my list. The one and only classic on my TBR list is the Iliad by Homer. Now, I have read the Iliad before. I am a teacher of Greek and Roman history and also Latin, so I have definitely read the Iliad, but I have not found a translation that I love. The Iliad is a slog on the best of days, but I have done a one-man show that I did not write called An Iliad, and in that they quote bits of the text, and the Iliad that they quote is the translation by Robert Fagles, which is this one right here. And I really love the musicality of those snippets of the Iliad that are quoted within that play. You can really feel the poetry of Homer's epic poetry coming out. I actually did not purchase this. This was given to me on my first day back to classes after the summer from my then girlfriend, now wife. She got this for me as a good luck at school today, honey, and I am greatly appreciative, but I have not yet read it. We have The Shadow of What Was Lost, the first book of the Lacanius trilogy by James Islington. I really like titles like this, despite the fact that sometimes they feel like they're going to collapse under the weight of their own pretension. But I really like titles like this rather than like the one-word titles like dragons or wizards or assassins. I mean, those are fine, I guess, but I really like super vague, may or may not have anything to do with the book titles. This book was also bought for me by my wife. We're from Panama City, and about 1.5 years ago, we were devastated by a Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Michael. And so about 1.5 weeks after that hurricane, we left about an hour out of town to a little town called Destin, where there's a Barnes & Noble. We don't have a Barnes & Noble here. We only have a Books A Million. And so when we went to the Barnes & Noble just to get away from the destruction and seeing the town kind of flattened, we each decided, my then girlfriend, now wife, decided that we would each find a book to pick out and buy for the other one to read. I bought her The Secret Garden. She bought me this one. Neither one of us have actually read the books we got for each other yet, but that's going to change this year. This book is way too big. Compare this to... Look, this one was already too big. This is so large. There's no reason a book should be this size unless it's a hardback book. It's too big. This book's too big. I don't know why it's so big, but it's going to be a pain to carry around. But I will soldier through it. So that's kind of a wrap-up for my fiction TBRs, my fiction to-be-reads. For now, I don't really know how many I can read in a month, and I don't really want to do a season just yet. I hope to get through all these at least by the end of the year, and hopefully if I continue to be more consistent with these videos, I can start to have monthly TBRs or seasonal, like fall, winter, summer, spring TBRs. But for now, this is what I'm going to try to read in 2020. My next videos are going to be reviews, starting with Malazan Book of the Fallen, starting with book 1, which is Gardens of the Moon. I love this series. I don't necessarily love this book, and you can hear all about why when I review this book in its own video. But if you really like epic fantasy and military fantasy or dark fantasy, Malazan Book of the Fallen is, or may be, for you. It really just depends. If you like this video, please say something below. If you didn't like this video, you can also say something below, and I will read it and say sorry that you didn't like it. I hope to make more of these videos because I really like talking about books. So, thanks guys for watching.